Imagine a quiet moment, not on a stage, not under flashing lights, not framed by headlines or controversy, but a moment where a mother finally speaks from a place the world rarely sees. Not as the mother of a billionaire. Not as the parent of a man whose name moves markets and dominates conversations about the future. But simply as a woman who has watched a child grow, stumble, dream dangerously big, suffer deeply, and keep walking forward even when the weight of the world pressed against him. In this imagined moment, Elon Musk's mother speaks not to impress you, not to defend him, not to explain him away. She speaks because she knows something most people never consider. She knows what it costs to raise someone who refuses to live small. She knows what it feels like to love someone who will be misunderstood by millions, judged by strangers, and reduced to headlines that never capture the full human story. And her message, though it may sound like it's about him, is actually meant for you. She begins gently, as mothers do, not with achievement but with beginnings. She speaks of a child who asked too many questions, who stared at the world as if it were a puzzle waiting to be solved. A child who felt things deeply, who disappeared into books and thoughts, who did not always fit easily into rooms that demanded conformity. She does not romanticize this. She remembers the loneliness, the confusion, the moments of fear when she wondered if the world would be kind to a mind that moved so differently. She remembers praying not for success, but for protection. For strength. For resilience. She wants you to understand this first. Greatness does not arrive polished. It is messy. It is awkward. It is often painful. The people you admire later were often the ones who didn't belong early. And if you feel out of place, misunderstood, or ahead of your time, that does not mean something is wrong with you. It may mean you are growing in a direction that others cannot yet see. Her voice carries the weight of years when she talks about sacrifice. Not the glamorous kind that gets applause, but the quiet kind that happens when no one is watching. She speaks of long nights, uncertainty, financial strain, and the strength it takes to believe in potential when evidence is scarce. She reminds you that behind every person who dares to change the world is someone who had to believe before the world did. Sometimes that person is a parent. Sometimes it has to be you. Then her message turns inward, almost as if she's speaking directly into your life. She tells you that waiting for permission is a trap. That the world rarely gives approval before results. That if she had waited for reassurance from others, fear would have won long before courage had a chance. She tells you that believing in someone's future often means standing alone for a while, enduring whispers, doubts, and criticism. And she asks you, softly but firmly, are you willing to stand by your own dream the way a mother stands by her child? She does not deny the controversies. She does not pretend the journey has been smooth or morally simple. Instead, She speaks about complexity. About how humans are not headlines. About how ambition can coexist with vulnerability, how brilliance can walk alongside blind spots, how strength does not cancel out struggle. She wants you to stop flattening people into heroes or villains, because doing so prevents you from learning the most important lessons. Growth is complicated. Becoming is not clean. Her words begin to feel less like a story about Elon Musk and more like a mirror held up to your own life. She speaks about perseverance not as stubbornness, but as devotion to a vision that keeps calling you forward. She reminds you that the road to building something meaningful often includes moments where everyone else advises you to quit. And sometimes the people who discourage you are not malicious. They are afraid. Afraid for you. Afraid of what they don't understand. Afraid of a future that doesn't look like the past. She tells you that as a mother, the hardest thing she learned was letting go of control. You cannot walk every step for someone you love. You cannot protect them from every failure. You cannot live their purpose on their behalf. You can only prepare them, support them, and trust that what you planted will grow in its own way. And then she pauses, as if she wants you to apply this truth to yourself. At some point, you must stop waiting for someone else to validate your path. You must trust what has been planted inside you. Her message grows more personal. She speaks about endurance. About how success did not arrive as a single moment, but as a series of decisions made under pressure. Decisions to keep going when comfort would have been easier. Decisions to face criticism rather than silence oneself. Decisions to risk being wrong in order to possibly be right. She tells you that the world celebrates results but ignores the years of invisible effort that precede them. And if your work feels unseen right now, that does not mean it is insignificant. She wants you to know that comparison is poison. She watched her son be compared to others, labeled, dismissed, elevated, torn down, all by people who never knew him personally. And she learned that external opinions change faster than the truth. One day you are praised, the next you are attacked. If your sense of worth depends on applause, you will never be stable. She urges you to build an inner compass, something steady, something rooted in values rather than validation. There is tenderness when she speaks about failure. She does not call it a stepping stone or dress it up with motivational slogans. She calls it what it is: painful, humbling, sometimes devastating. But she also calls it honest. She tells you that failure reveals who you are when the spotlight disappears. It strips away ego and forces clarity. And if you survive it without losing your curiosity, your integrity, or your will to try again, you emerge stronger than success alone could ever make you. Her message is not about idolizing her son. It is about humanizing the journey. She wants you to see that extraordinary outcomes often come from ordinary perseverance repeated over time. That the courage to think differently usually begins as the courage to be alone. That innovation is not born from comfort, but from dissatisfaction with what already exists. She speaks, too, about love. Not romantic love, not fame-driven admiration, but the kind of love that stays when results are uncertain. She believes this kind of love is the foundation of everything meaningful. And she asks you to consider whether you are offering that kind of commitment to your own calling. Do you only love your dream when it is praised? Or do you love it enough to keep showing up when no one is watching? As her imagined message comes to a close, there is no dramatic declaration. No instruction to be like Elon Musk. No promise that you will change the world. Instead, there is something quieter and more powerful. She tells you that your life does not need to be extraordinary by someone else's standards to be meaningful. It only needs to be honest. Faithful to what you were given. Brave enough to try. She leaves you with this thought, spoken not as a public figure, but as a mother who has seen how fragile and resilient a human life can be. The future is shaped not just by those who dream loudly, but by those who endure patiently. By those who keep learning. By those who refuse to let fear decide the size of their life. She continues, as if she sensed you were still listening, as if she knew there was more your heart needed to hear. Her voice does not rush. It carries the calm of someone who has lived long enough to understand that the most important truths arrive slowly. She speaks about patience, not the passive kind that waits for life to happen, but the active kind that keeps building even when progress feels invisible. She says she watched years go by where nothing made sense to outsiders. Years where effort did not equal reward. Years where belief had to be renewed daily. And she tells you this because she knows how easily people give up right before things begin to change. She knows how tempting it is to interpret silence as failure. But silence, she says, is often just the sound of roots growing deeper. She wants you to understand that the world often misunderstands intensity. When someone cares deeply, thinks deeply, works relentlessly, the world calls it obsession, arrogance, or instability. But from a mother's eyes, she saw something else. She saw devotion. She saw a refusal to betray one's inner knowing. And she gently asks you whether you've been told to tone yourself down, to be more realistic, more normal, more acceptable. She reminds you that many of the limits placed on you were not chosen by you. They were inherited from other people's fears. Her words become softer when she talks about loneliness. She admits that the path of those who think differently can be isolating. There were moments when she wished things were easier, quieter, safer. Moments when she worried about the emotional cost of standing apart from the crowd. But she learned that loneliness is not always a sign that something is wrong. Sometimes it is the price of clarity. Sometimes it is the space where original thought is born. She tells you that the most dangerous lie people believe is that confidence comes before action. In reality, she says, confidence is built by surviving what you once feared. You don't wake up brave. You become brave by doing things while afraid and realizing you didn't break. She watched this happen again and again. And each time, the fear lost a little of its power. She wants you to know that courage is not loud. Often, it is quiet persistence when no one is clapping. She speaks about criticism next, and her tone changes slightly, not with bitterness, but with clarity. She says that once you choose a path that matters, criticism is inevitable. Silence is reserved for those who do nothing. She learned to recognize the difference between feedback meant to help and noise meant to distract. And she hopes you will learn it too. Not every opinion deserves space in your mind. Not every voice deserves influence over your direction. She reminds you that success magnifies everything. Strengths become more visible. Flaws become louder. Mistakes become public. She wants you to stop believing that you must be perfect before you begin. Perfection is a moving target, and waiting for it is another way fear keeps control. Progress, she says, is built by imperfect people who are willing to learn in public and adjust without losing themselves. Her message turns reflective when she speaks about identity. She says she watched the world try to define her son again and again: genius, villain, savior, threat. And none of it captured the full truth. She tells you this because she knows how easy it is to internalize labels. How dangerous it is to let others decide who you are. She urges you to stay anchored to your values. Because roles change, titles fade, and public opinion shifts, but character is what remains when everything else falls away. She pauses, as if allowing space for you to breathe, and then she speaks about resilience in a way that feels deeply personal. Resilience, she says, is not pretending things don't hurt. It is allowing yourself to feel the weight of disappointment without letting it define you. It is resting when needed, recalibrating when necessary, but never abandoning the deeper call that keeps returning to your heart. She tells you that as a mother, one of the hardest lessons was accepting that growth often looks like struggle from the outside. The world sees chaos where there is actually transformation. She hopes you will be gentle with yourself during seasons that don't make sense yet. Becoming takes time. Becoming is uncomfortable. And that discomfort is not evidence of failure, but of change. Her words begin to sound almost like a quiet encouragement meant only for you. She tells you that you don't need to convince everyone. You don't need to explain your vision to those who are committed to misunderstanding you. Energy is precious. Spend it building, not defending. Let results speak when words fall short. She talks about faith, not necessarily religious faith, but faith in process. Faith that consistent effort compounds. Faith that learning never stops. Faith that even wrong turns teach you something essential. She wants you to trust that nothing is wasted when you are paying attention. She returns again to the idea of responsibility. When you have the ability to shape something meaningful, you also carry the responsibility to act with awareness. Power without reflection can become destructive. Ambition without humility can isolate you. She says these lessons were not learned once, but over and over, through experience. And she encourages you to stay teachable, no matter how far you go. As this part of her message unfolds, you realize she is not offering a formula. She is offering perspective. A reminder that life is not a straight line. That the people who change things are often the ones who refuse to give up during the most uncertain chapters. She ends this portion with a quiet truth that lingers. She says that no matter how far someone goes, no matter how visible their impact becomes, they are still human. Still learning. Still shaped by love, fear, hope, and doubt. And she wants you to remember your own humanity too. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to question. You are allowed to grow at your own pace. Her voice fades gently, but the message stays with you. There is still more she hasn't said yet, and you can feel it. She continues once more, not because she planned to, but because some truths refuse to remain unspoken when the heart is finally open. Her words now carry a deeper stillness, the kind that comes after years of watching life unfold in unexpected ways. She speaks about time, how it changes everything and yet reveals what was always there. She says that in the early years, everyone is in a hurry. A hurry to prove, to arrive, to be seen. But time teaches patience in a way no advice ever could. She watched seasons where progress seemed slow, almost invisible, and then suddenly, in hindsight, realized those were the years that mattered most. Those were the years where discipline was formed. Values were tested, and identity was quietly solidified. She wants you to know that if you feel behind, you may actually be being prepared. Her voice grows thoughtful when she talks about expectations. She admits that even as a mother, she had to release her own ideas of what success should look like. Life rarely follows the script we imagine. And when we cling too tightly to expectations, we miss the unexpected doors opening quietly beside us. She tells you that flexibility is not weakness. It is intelligence. It is the ability to adapt without losing direction. She speaks about inner pressure, the kind no one sees. The pressure to live up to potential, to justify sacrifices, to prove that the risk was worth it. She knows how heavy that pressure can become. And she gently reminds you that your worth was never meant to be measured solely by output. You are more than what you produce, more than what you achieve. If you forget that, success will never feel like enough. She reflects on moments of doubt, not just external doubt, but the kind that creeps in quietly at night. She says there were times when even the strongest belief wavered. Times when questions had no answers. Times when continuing forward felt irrational. And yet, something deeper kept moving. Not certainty, but commitment. She tells you that doubt does not cancel purpose. Often, it walks alongside it. Her words turn almost protective when she speaks about the cost of visibility. She explains that once the world starts watching, privacy becomes a luxury. Every action is interpreted. Every silence is analyzed. And she urges you to decide early who you are when no one is watching, because that version of you will be the anchor when attention becomes overwhelming. If you lose yourself to the crowd, you will never feel at home anywhere. She tells you that she learned to separate noise from truth. That not every reaction deserves a response. That stillness is sometimes the strongest reply. She hopes you will learn this too, because the world will always have opinions, but very few people carry wisdom. Choose carefully who you listen to. Choose even more carefully who you allow to shape your decisions. She speaks about responsibility again, but this time with warmth. Responsibility, she says, is not a burden meant to crush you. It is a sign that what you are doing matters. If you feel the weight of what you are building, it means it has significance. And significance always asks something from us. Effort. Integrity. Awareness. She encourages you not to run from that weight, but to grow strong enough to carry it without losing compassion. Her message becomes quieter when she speaks about balance. She admits it is not something you achieve once and keep forever. It is something you constantly adjust. There will be seasons where work demands more, and seasons where life asks you to slow down. Wisdom is knowing when to push and when to pause. She tells you that burning out helps no one, and resting does not mean you have failed. She shares a truth learned through watching long journeys unfold. Fulfillment rarely comes from reaching a peak. It comes from alignment. From knowing that what you are doing reflects who you are. From waking up without betraying yourself. She hopes you will seek that kind of fulfillment, because applause fades, but alignment sustains you. She speaks softly about love again, this time in the context of grounding. No matter how far someone travels, how high they rise, love is what keeps them human. Love is what reminds you why any of it matters. And she hopes you never sacrifice relationships on the altar of ambition. Success without connection, she says, is a lonely place. She tells you that fear will never completely disappear. New levels bring new uncertainties. But fear changes when you stop treating it as an enemy and start seeing it as a signal. A signal that you are stepping beyond what is familiar. Growth always lives there. She wants you to stop waiting for fearlessness and start moving with intention despite fear. Her words now feel like a quiet blessing. She tells you that your journey does not need to resemble anyone else's. There is no universal timeline. No single definition of arrival. She urges you to honor your own rhythm. To trust your own learning curve, to stop measuring your progress against someone else's highlight reel. She speaks one last time about legacy. Not the kind written in history books, but the kind written in lives touched, minds inspired, and courage passed on. Legacy, she says, is not what you leave behind. It is what you awaken in others while you are here. And if your story gives someone else permission to try, to persist, to believe, then it matters more than you know. Her voice slows, as if she knows this part is nearing its end. She leaves you with a simple, steady truth. You are allowed to evolve. You are allowed to change your mind. You are allowed to outgrow old versions of yourself. What matters is that you keep moving with honesty and intention, and as her words settle, you realize she was never asking you to admire her son. She was asking you to believe in your own capacity to endure, to grow, and to shape something meaningful, even when the path is unclear. She speaks one last time, and now her words feel less like a message and more like a quiet hand resting on your shoulder. There is no urgency left in her voice, no need to persuade or explain. Only truth, spoken gently, as someone who has seen how life unfolds when you keep going long enough. She tells you that in the end, what matters most is not how loudly the world remembers you, but how honestly you lived while you were here. She has watched attention come and go like waves, powerful but temporary. What lasts, she says, is the way you treated people when nothing was being recorded. The way you spoke when no one was listening. The way you chose integrity when cutting corners would have been easier. These are the moments that shape a life, even if they never make headlines. She speaks about humility, not as self-doubt, but as groundedness. No matter how far someone goes, there must be a part of them that remembers where they began. A part that stays teachable. A part that listens. She tells you that growth without humility becomes brittle. It looks strong, but it breaks easily. She hopes you will always remain curious enough to learn and wise enough to admit when you are wrong. Her voice softens when she speaks about love again, this time as the quiet force behind everything worthwhile. Love is what steadies you when the world becomes loud. Love is what reminds you that success is a tool, not a substitute for meaning. She wants you to remember that people matter more than outcomes, and that kindness is never a distraction from greatness. It is part of it. She speaks about forgiveness, something rarely discussed when talking about achievement. Forgiveness for others, yes, but also for yourself. There will be decisions you wish you made differently. Words you wish you chose more carefully. Moments you wish you handled better. She tells you not to let regret harden you. Learn, adjust, and keep moving. Carrying shame only slows the journey. She tells you that strength is not the absence of vulnerability. It is the willingness to keep your heart open in a world that often rewards cynicism. She has seen how easily people close themselves off after disappointment. But closing your heart, she says, is far more dangerous than failing. Because once you stop caring, nothing truly meaningful can grow. Her final message turns inward, as if she is speaking directly to the quiet part of you that wonders if any of this is worth it. She tells you that even if your efforts are never fully understood, even if your work is imperfect, even if your impact is smaller than you imagined, it still counts. Effort given honestly is never wasted. Love offered sincerely always matters. She reminds you that life is not a race to the top, but a journey toward wholeness. You are not here to become someone else. You are here to become more fully yourself. And that process takes time, patience, and compassion. She ends with a truth that feels like both a release and an invitation. You do not have to carry the weight of the future all at once. Just take the next honest step. Then the next. Trust that clarity comes through movement, not waiting, and as her voice finally fades, there is no applause, no dramatic conclusion. Only a sense of calm understanding. Her message was never about fame, or power, or even legacy. It was about living with courage, responsibility, and heart, and in that silence, you realize something quietly profound. The most personal message she offered was not about her son at all. It was about you believing that your life, exactly as it is unfolding, is worthy of care, effort, and hope.